live and check out the title for this week. Well, Ask Anything Agility Q&A with our world famous dog trainer, Jessica Ajoux. I'm really excited about this one because we've done quite a few shows with Jessica and you guys have really enjoyed it. The show notes and the blogs that we've passed on, a lot of knowledge. And the truth is, a lot of you folks have been asking subsequent questions after the blogs or after the live show. So we decided to actually do an actual Q&A with Jessica all around dog agility, and you can ask her anything that you want. So the beauty of that is that we've got some questions that you guys have submitted, and we're going to cover that here on the show. And as you join in, if you have questions for Jessica, just put it into the notes section. We should be able to catch that, and then we'll be able to answer that as best as we can. So a couple of things, you're going to want the show notes from this event as well. So all you have to do is at the bottom, just put the word dog lover as one word, and then this will get you access to the show notes from today. And in addition to that, we're still doing some really cool, nice giveaways as we usually do. So you'll be able to be entered in the drawing for the one TDC. All you have to do, really simple, just hashtag in the notes, Paw Love, PAWLUV. Just hashtag that, and then we'll be happy to do a drawing. Cool. So without any more time to wait, let's bring on our superstar. Let me bring her on. Here's the magic. Jessica Ajoux. Here we go. Here she comes. Hey, Jessica. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I want to thank you because we've really enjoyed all of the shows we've done with you, and people have really appreciated those. And people have been asking questions. So today we're like, all right, let's do this. Let's do this Q&A. And if you just join in, this is Jessica Ajoux. And just to make sure you get the show notes for today, in the notes section, just put the word dog lover as one of them. And if you want to get the one TDC giveaway, just put Paw Love hashtag. Cool. We got this out of the way. Welcome, welcome. Are you excited to hear your questions?
Yes, I think it's by asking questions that we learn stuff. And even I always actually start all my seminars by asking people, like, what is the thing that you absolutely want to know from me? Because this is the opportunity, and if I can answer it, then the time was well spent. So here we go.
Exactly. And the good news is, I mean, there's some of your followers that are really high in agility, and some that are just starting. So you will see that some of the questions that we're going to share with you are everywhere from that matter. And that's the part that's really fun. All right, let's go with the first question that we have for you. So when do you know your agility dog is ready for competition for the first time?
Well, way to get right into it. I definitely think, all right, so big question. Definitely a lot of different opinions, and I'll tell you what I think. So the number one thing is, I definitely think it depends on the dog, okay? Mm-hmm. And it depends on the individual dog, the team, and then what you're in the process of training. Because I think that there are many dogs that will be ready to show in like a jumper class or a fast class or a gambler's class before they're necessarily ready to show in a standard class. And that could just be because a certain obstacle, such as training a running dog walk, would take longer to train, possibly. Maybe it doesn't for some. So I would say it's going to be a little dependent on what your training path is for certain obstacles. So personally, I like to expose my dogs to the show ring once I know that they know how to do whatever the skills I'm going to ask them to do in the competition are. And I don't need it to be completely perfect, but I also, I don't expect them to necessarily win the class or whatnot their first time out. But I do expect that I've done the right thing to train them, to prepare them for the test. They have been educated, they know what they should be doing. And then it's just a matter of, hey, we go to this dog show and you should be doing those things as well. I've had dogs that I've definitely started at 15 months. And then just because I've started competing with them does not mean I necessarily keep them in competition. So for example, when I brought Lou out, she was 15 months. We did standard, we did jumpers, but it became clear that I was to stop doing standard, and it was because she kept flying off the seesaw. And now the rules have changed, and you're allowed to go back and fix things. Like, all it would have taken was probably one fix. I mean, I assume, but we weren't allowed to do that. And so had I continued entering the trials and allowing that mistake to keep happening without being able to teach her how to do it, or get her to do it the correct way in competition, I would have actually been doing a disservice, right? I would have made a problem that was happening at the competition that was not happening in practice. So I stopped entering standard classes and just did some fast classes instead. And then when the teeter became back under control and that she could do it on the first try, then I started doing standard again. My most favorite thing to do is to enter like a trial or two and then don't enter any, so that you can test out how it's going. And one of two things happens. You go, oh my gosh, this is so great, I can't wait till the next one. Or you go, ooh, good thing that there's this little break, because they're young, they're going to do things all over the map, even if you have prepared them. And the worst thing to do is to start to feel the pressure of, I have to get this cue, or I want the qualifying. Don't do that. You're training the dog. So when you believe that they know their job adequately enough to be able to do it in public, it's okay to enter the trial, as long as you understand that you might have to pull out of some of the trials, and whether it is, paying the entry fee and then not going, or simply not having entered some, so that you can assess what's been happening at the competition.
Excellent. That's a very thorough answer. Thank you for that, Jessica. I mean, I think it's a great question. I really like the fact that you take your time. You're not rushing or pushing the dog, but you're learning, as I heard you, in preparing the dog.
Yeah, I'm trying to react to what the dog is doing, because 15 months is not super old, but I'm also not expecting that they're necessarily going to get it perfect, and I do want them to learn what the trial environment is. And just because I started competing doesn't mean that I must keep entering show after show after show, right? You can assess and say, okay, that was fine, or that's not okay. And then on the flip side, like with Optimus, he took like a year break from competition. So
Really?
was doing okay, but then I decided to retrain his A-frame and dog walk, actually. And during that time, I couldn't enter him because he couldn't do a dog walk. So why am I entering a competition when the dog does not know how to do a piece of the equipment that will be tested at the competition? So I could have entered him just in a jumper class or whatnot, but I just don't think it's right to test something that is still in the process of being trained, or that I fully well know he can't do when he's being asked. So we had a year break, and then he came back to it. So keep that in mind. That's
a really good part. I really love how you shared that, because I think you're right. Once you start, you can want to continue. But the example that you give of Optimus of taking a year break, I think that's really good feedback for everybody. Yeah.
I didn't want to, but it was what was required. There was no point in throwing him in the deep end when he didn't know how to swim, right? No. He needed to be prepared for it.
Excellent. Always watching the experience of what the dog is experiencing. That's awesome. For you folks who just joined in, the code, I see some of you folks are putting it's dog lover with an R. So just a heads up for you guys to get the show notes subsequently. Thank you, Jessica, for that. And the one thing I would say also, because I've seen you at trials, is what you do is you bring your puppies even before they start competing, so they get knowledgeable with the environment, the sounds, the smell, and frankly, the anticipation of wanting to be in the ring. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more access you can to being able to take different places, it's really helpful, because the hard thing is if you only train in one place and then you go to a competition or go to a new class, it's hard for them. They don't just generalize. So that is one of two ways. Like, you have to expose them to it, but also entering the competition does expose them to it. So I take that into account too. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to enter standard. I'm just going to enter jumpers just so that I can show them, hey, we do agility at these big buildings too. Isn't this exciting?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's fun to watch you guys and take some of those pictures of those puppies and see them grow. I love doing
They're
that.
growing.
Yeah, they are.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
6 months yesterday they were.
Yesterday, 6 months. Wow. Yeah, they look like little adults now. Great. So if you've just joined in, we are with Jessica Ajoux. She's the co-founder of United Dog Agility, and she's doing a Q&A today. So we've got some questions that have been submitted prior, but if you're coming in, you hear Jessica talk about something, it triggers a question for you. We're monitoring the comments, so don't hesitate to ask your question. And to get the show notes of this event, just put dog lover in the notes, lover with an R at the end. Here we go. And also, we are doing a drawing of the 1 TDC. So make sure that you hashtag paw love. Let me just put that on the screen so you guys can actually see, because we have a goofy way of putting paw love. There we go. So you guys can see it here. Here we go. All right. Now, moving on to the next question. Actually, we've done this one. Perfect. No, the 1 TDC. So when is the best time to give your dog a 1 TDC? Before the agility trial, during the trial, after the trial is over for the day, and what if it was a couple-day trial? I'm going to help with that answer, but what do you do, Jessica?
I was going to say, I think you're probably more the expert, but I'll tell you what I do. I don't necessarily do anything different. So I give my dogs 1 TDC in the morning typically, because that's the morning time is when we do all the supplements. And they all get one, and I just keep that system the same. So I do travel with it. So I make sure I'm always bringing it with me if we go to traveling for competitions. And I keep it the same. I definitely know that you can use it for like pinch moments, like if they've cut a pad or something like that. It really does help. So we have it on hand for that as well. Luckily, knock on wood, that's not happened to us, but it's good to know that I have that option.
Excellent. And then from a 1 TDC standpoint, what you shared is absolutely right. When you're in the moment of competition, do not change anything that your dog is used to, because there's so much energy going on. So even when somebody comes in and introduces 1 TDC for the first time, we usually say, don't start at the trial. Don't introduce anything new. Keep your rhythm. Keep them in the zone. That being said, and this is really important from a dosage standpoint, you guys have athletes. So they tend to go into a loading dose a little prior to competition, especially if they're older, like 5 or 6 and up. So that they have plenty to help them, from a recovery. Because 1 TDC promotes healthy inflammatory responses. So the fact is, when you're going out there, well, they're building a lot of lactic acid. And as Jessica has mentioned, which is a really good point, is that if your dog pulls something and there's a little bit of heat somewhere in the body, you can use it topically. It's used a lot. So folks like Ria Asiani and her husband, they do that all the time. They use it topically as well to help for faster recovery. And we have actually on that note, and then I'll just grab that question real fast. That's from Jennifer. She's asking, at what age should I start giving 1 TDC into a puppy? That's a great question, and I'll cover that one real fast, Jessica.
Yeah, go right ahead.
A lot of people ask us that question. Here's the deal. You can start 1 TDC virtually at any age. When they're puppies, we generally say once the adult teeth are in, that's when you start. But you could really start before that. There's no issues. The reality is it's completely preventative at that stage, so you don't need to do a loading dose with a puppy. It's not necessary. We usually say that later when they get around 4 or 5, depending on the dog. So Jennifer, your answer is really any age as a puppy is fine. Generally, once the adult teeth are in around 6 months, 5-6 months. Thanks for the question. All right, let's go into our next question here, which is, we've done that one. And we're going, this is a great question about flanking. What to do about flanking, physical and verbal cueing, not always enough. And this is a question from Annika that she submitted prior for you, Jessica. So tell us a little bit about flanking as well, just to be clear.
That was Marcy's question with her dog, Annika. I do know them. All right, so flanking is referring to usually a herding dog / often a border collie, their tendency to like go out wide. So if you're trying to get them to come like in next to you or come into you, the herding dogs have this tendency of wanting to go out and around, and that's because that's like bred into them in order to catch the sheep. Okay? They want to come in front of the sheep and stop them. So if useful in herding, frustrating in agility, because if you're trying to get them to go in a straight line or come into your side and they're veering off around, it's obviously not efficient. So it's probably a very complicated answer. You can start even from the beginning. Like I'll backtrack. So before it's happening, if you start to see your dog has this tendency of somewhat like outrunning or veering around or making a curve when you want them to go straight. So even in like foundation exercises, if you throw the toy forward and send them and they're kind of going out and around to it, I would recommend doing it against a wall or against like a fence to where they can't go out. So you're throwing the toy straight and like somewhat using a barrier to prevent them from doing that behavior, because it's not conscious, it's just something that they are doing. So if you start to see it developing even in foundation training, use the environment to somewhat prevent that from happening. I would also say this, it can be associated a lot with people's connection. So where you're looking tells the dog where they should be going. So if I'm looking, I'm not even going to attempt to say left and right because this is switched to this side for my dog to come to, there we go, come to this side, okay? They might come, but if I start to look forward like that, now I've disconnected, and that will encourage them sometimes to try to cut out and around. So be careful that you're maintaining good connection and not doing what I refer to as like bobblehead. And it's a tendency because you want to look at where you're going, but if I'm watching the dog and then looking forward, doing this type of stuff, it just confuses them a little bit, and it can promote them wanting to come out and around. I would definitely also make sure to not let them cut behind you. So if you're looking for them to come to one side or the other and they start going behind you, one, don't look for them on that side. So I call that like undoing your cross. If I'm looking over here and I want them to come and they go behind me, do not follow them over there, because then they've they've convinced you. They're getting you to like go with them as opposed to just holding what side you want them to be so that they could possibly figure out what you're doing through there. I also think probably some pre-placed toys along the path or rewards along the path. So
good point.
I think sometimes flanking, they're not sure where they're supposed to go, or they don't even realize they're doing it. So making the answer supremely clear by putting the reward along the path, so it's like this is absolutely where you're going, can help them or help minimize that tendency of going out, because they're not trying to be inefficient. If they really want to get there, they'll go there. Oh, I'm not in the screen. If they really want to get there, they'll go there. So I think that little strategies like that, but just definitely do not go with them if they try to cut behind you.
Got it. Good. Great answer. Very thorough for us as well. And if you've just joined in, Jessica Ajoux, dog agility trainer expert, co-founder of United Dog Agility.
I just thought of one more thing. I'm sorry. Come back to it.
One more on this flanking question. Go for it.
Here it is. I think I would also make sure I teach them how to not necessarily stay at my side, but be able to operate close to you. So think about like agility healing, like doing some circle work. So meaning if I'm running and I've trained my dog that they could stay at my side and not cut in front or cut behind. It used to be quite popular thing to train. I don't do it that much anymore, but I think if I had a dog who was really trying to outrun me, I would invest a little bit of time in teaching that, like almost like agility healing. So it doesn't have to be super, super formal, but just remotely next to me, not cutting in front or behind. So basically a here command or a side command.
I think you just created something there. Agility healing. I don't know. I think maybe you should coin that phrase.
Well, I don't want my dog to heal in agility. I want him to go, but I don't want them cutting in front of me either or behind.
I think the healing is for us and less for them.
Just, yeah, trying to paint the picture.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica, for that. As I shared, if you just joined us, this is Jessica Ajoux, co-founder of United Dog Agility, and she's doing a Q&A for us. So if you join in, a couple of things. One, make sure that if you want to get the show notes, you're going to want to get, just put dog lover in the notes section, and it'll prompt you and we'll get you covered so that you'll get those. In addition, we're doing some giveaways as usual of the one TDC. So you can go ahead and just put paw love in the notes section, and we'll get you in the drawing. As a matter of fact, if you need some wine TDC, just go to workssowell.com and just use the code that we have for Jessica for her live show, which is live10, and you get 10% off. Okay, let's go to the next question. I really like this question. I thought this was really cool. Thank you for submitting. I don't know who submitted, but it was a great one. What skills might an older person, 70s or early 80s, need to run agility with a pretty fast dog and be somewhat successful? I love this.
I love it. Yeah. First of all, like it's you definitely can be successful. So it doesn't even have to be somewhat. Like I have students and have seen some fantastic runs of less mobile handlers with exceptionally fast dogs, and not just on like a novice course or a local master's course, but even like on some courses with international flavor and such. So first of all, it is all possible. Okay? And oh, you have a happy Sasha. It is all possible, and the price is training. Okay, so the more independent the dog must be in order to go cover the course, the more training you're going to have to put into it. And this is what the question is asking. The skills, in my opinion. Okay, number one, start line. You have to have the start line, and you have to have a very reliable start line to where they are not pushing you, and to where you could go anywhere on that course and have a lateral lead out, whatever. There's no limit on your start line. And that's like, without it, don't think it's going to happen. No, somewhat successful. Then the next side would be like the independent obstacle skills. You need your call to, send, run by, peeling off, all of that on your weaves and on your contacts. I personally would expect that teaching stop contacts across the board would be the way to go. You maybe could do running A-frame, but they're still, depending on the course, would be more or less difficult to manage. So if you had very well-trained stop contacts, then there's nothing you can't do, because there would be control points and the dog could go off and do it on their own, and you could get to wherever the next critical spot on the course. I think they should have a rear cross, being able to turn away from the handler. And I actually really like teaching them the opposite end of the tunnel cue, newer idea to teach the dog to go to the other end of the tunnel. It's a very, very popular challenge in most local competitions. And if the dog can know how to do that one automatically, I think that would make things easier. Now, I do think that even with less running and such, you could still do the international style challenges. Then you need very independent backside skill, very independent throttle skill. And again, I think it's all to do with the control on the start lines and the dog being able to operate independently and do it at a great distance. And just because you're doing the distance does not mean that the dog has to go slow. You just have to decide, or not decide. I mean, if you can't get there, you can't get there, but know that you do not actually need to be close to them for them to execute the skill. It's just obviously going to take a little bit more training, but it's very possible.
And I think I sense in listening to you.
I forgot one. I just
go ahead.
This is what happens when I have questions and I have to think on the spot. A go on. Must have go on. If you have that, that would be for all courses, a go on.
Yeah, that I always think of Optimus. I'm sorry, Famous for that one in you at Westminster a few years back, when you just like, whew, and that dog was just like gone. It was pretty amazing. It was a beautiful run. And obviously, you've done a video for us on this in the past. We'll make sure to really share that with the group as well. You'll get that into the show notes. Great. And if you just join in and you have a question for Jessica right now as you're listening, put it in the notes and we'll pull it up and we'll make sure to answer that. Or I should say, Jessica is going to make sure to answer that for you. All right. Next question that we have for you. So this is an interesting one as well. Jess, you now are you training differently for Empower and Genuine than you did for Lou or Wit? Because you've had a new puppies, like you said, 6 months. And so are you doing anything different for those guys that you've learned from the past? And can you share?
Yeah. So I would say that the difference between for Perry and I training Hallelujah and Wit, and then this new generation with Power and Jenny, it's not as drastic as the one before. So like what I did differently between Lou and Optimus, and certainly between Lou and Fame, I think that was the big overhaul. And then now we have just refining of the system. So certainly teaching independent verbals or skills and verbals, such as the backside and an in throttle, similar to actually all the things I just mentioned about the skills that would be required if you're running less, teaching that to higher degrees to a trick level so that the dogs can do them. Now, what we've done a little differently with the puppies, given that we have learned from Lou and Wit, we are emphasizing the dog's verbal like recognition earlier on in the training. So like even as like the first things they were learning was how to do sit and down and stand. And rather than just like luring and moving on to the next thing, we focused on them being able to do those skills with no help, only the verbal. So that's really hard. Like honestly, Famous can't do that. She needs some help, and Lou can't always like distinguish between them in high arousal things. So, but anyhow, what we've done is we've emphasized the listening from earlier on in training, even before there was any type of agility involved, in the effort to get them to pay more attention to the actual words that people are saying. Some dogs do this more naturally than others. I mean, Prime did it super naturally, even though I wasn't saying very many words to him. Lou, I found, was pretty normal about it. And I don't know if I didn't even train it to Famous, so I can't even speak to it. But we're just emphasizing more the verbal distinctions and them learning that idea that what comes out of my mouth is going to matter, because they respond so much more naturally to body motion. The other thing we've definitely implemented is what I spoke to in, I don't remember if it was our last blog or the one before, but the instructional releases. So instead of, I have a release word, I'd say break, but if I'm giving instructions, so if I put him on the, they're not on a start line yet, but if I put them in a stay and I want them to go to a tunnel or go to a jump, instead of okay this or okay that, I just say the this or the that. And that has helped them. It's expedited training so much for them understanding things. Like
that's a great, that was a great,
refer back to the release word video, and that's what we're definitely paying attention to with that one.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
No, go ahead.
We're going to add that video as well and put it in the show notes, the release words, because it's really interesting to watch you in seeing your evolution from a training standpoint, because you've definitely mastered the nonverbal cues as an expert. And then you're not that you're reintroducing, but you're emphasizing, and you're kind of bridging both worlds. And your new puppies are benefiting.
Yeah, it's turning out to be the way to go. Like understanding like what dogs respond to naturally through natural handling. Like you have to know that, in my opinion. But you can also supplement it with more training, and then like the more you've trained the tricks, the easier they can do it. That's the insurance portion. And I think the one other thing differently, just from a very like agility technical thing, we're going to experiment more with using guide wires for weave pull training. We've historically used, Perry's used channels, I've used weave-o-matics, and I like that all. We've done 2x2s, and I think like actually if you ask 4 different people sitting, agility trainers sitting at a table, how they train weave pulls, you'll get 4 different answers. Like everyone trains them differently, and mostly dogs get trained in weave pulls, but we're going to definitely explore more with the guide wires, which is actually how my very, 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 very first agility dog learned how to weave. So like one of those oldies but goodies, because I think it might help them understand the idea of continuity through the poles, that there's only one choice, or I'm sorry, 2 choices of entries, here or here, even though there's all these gaps. That's not where you can enter weave poles, and the idea of the wires, I think, will help that.
So I think, Jessica, that your followers and fellow students and professionals are going to want to see some videos of that. So keep that back in mind.
Grow a little more for that one, but yes, we will. That's the current thinking, the game plan.
And I would say, because I've known you for a few years now, the one thing I've always appreciated about Jessica is Jessica never says that she knows it. It's always like, this is what it's providing right now in the relationship in the bond with the dog. And there's always this drive to improve and to learn more. So we are the benefactors of that because you're sharing it. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's agility is really evolving constantly. And I am driven to stay at the ahead of the curve, as hard as that seems sometimes.
Absolutely. And your students will keep you in check too, and keep asking questions. So you have to think through. That's the beauty of it as well. If you've just joined us, we are with Jessica Ajoux. She's the co-founder of United Dog Agility. She has an incredible center. If you have a chance to come around where she's at, it's really an amazing place. She's answering today Q&A questions for you, and you're going to want the show notes. So all you have to do in our notes section is put the word dog lover as one word, and it'll prompt you, and you'll be able to access that. And we are still doing some 1 TDC giveaways. So just hashtag paw love, LUV, and then you'll be entered. So let me go into the next question for you. And this is an interesting question and some people have experienced this. We've moved recently and lost our in-person access to our longtime coach and training facility. Is it possible to keep an 8-year-old spring in competition, body conditioning with access to only a couple jumps and weaves, or should we postpone some of the training and so forth? How do you handle that? Because that does happen. Your trainer leaves and you're kind of stuck in your yard and a few equipment. What would you suggest?
So I think one, that's sad, and it's like sometimes what happens, and then you have to like dig deep and get creative with things. I would expect that as an 8-year-old dog who's already been somewhat trained in agility, the good news is you don't necessarily need to train things in agility. The dog has the skills. So it's more about maintenance, meaning keeping the dog sharp about their skill level. And then the bigger question I think that's being here is like keeping them in the right physical shape to be able to do agility.
Right.
I think that as long as the dog is getting suitable exercise, and it's not just from agility, right? They need to be walking, hiking, all of the conditioning type things that you would do for them. If they're staying in good physical shape, then even not very much access to agility is certainly fine. In fact, if you're competing like more weekends than not, they're getting a lot of exercise. So you don't necessarily have to be training as much as you were doing. I think you just need to like keep aware of it. I think setting like plenty with poles and jumps, you could be creative with setting up small sequences and things like that. So I see no reason why, but you might just have to make sure that agility is not the dog's only source of conditioning, which is not necessarily good for them anyway.
Good point.
So doing like, if you can take them off leash hiking, that's like, the best one. If you can't take them off leash, you go hiking on leash. If you don't have hiking, going around the neighborhood, whatever it is you need to do. But you have to just come up with other ways of keeping them in shape. But I think the lack of access to agility is not necessarily going to hinder the physical shape. It just might detract from some of the like contacts if you've had to maintain certain behaviors. But at 8, maybe the dog has enough in there. They don't need, whatever's in there, it's usually in there, and they don't forget too much. So if you could get sporadic access here or there, I think it would be good.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, as you're leading there, because you do have some older dogs and some that you've retired. But have you found exactly what you're sharing, that you've reduced some of the training because they didn't need it as much, and frankly you want to
Right.
protect their bodies as well? Maybe you can talk about Famous or Optimus from that standpoint.
Yeah, so it's I would rather not be doing heavy training with them. Like even like I'm kind of conservative. Like at 5, I'm trying not to like still be training stuff. Like whatever I've trained is in there, and then it's more about maintaining and then keeping them in good physical shape for it. I did actually feel bad for Prime because I did retrain his dog walk. He was 3, and like that's not old by any means, but it was a long process, and I wish that I'm glad I didn't do it at 6. Like now I wouldn't go through a big overhaul of training it. And actually that did happen to Fame later in her career, as some of agility was evolving faster than I was willing to train her. And I just at some point decided, okay, fine, we're done with the international things because I just can't possibly train this dog enough in order to keep her at the same pace that agility is evolving. So a lot of the skills that now my young dogs have, because I just know to teach it, I didn't teach it to her. And yeah, you can teach old dog new tricks, but you got to work on it quite a bit for it to be ready to be prime time and doing all these very complicated obstacle courses that it changed so much that I just called it good. And then we just did local agility, and she could do all of those skills. I was more happy to do the things that she knew how to do, especially as she got a little older, because I made the personal decision that I didn't want to put all of that training back into it.
That makes sense.
Because I didn't think I could get out the other side. So why do it and put all that extra stress on her body when there was an avenue of agility that she could compete in very well, knowing already what she knew? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And good.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like the sad part. I have retired her at this point. She's 10. She's in really good shape. She could still be doing it, but I am not putting in enough conditioning as far as agility in her right now to allow her to keep safely doing agility, at least for Fame, because she goes really fast still. And I would have to keep her in, she's not in bad shape, but she's more just like running at the park, running at her house, doing like things here and there. She's not in the top physical shape that she was when she was my number 1 agility dog. And it is dangerous for her to be put on an agility course without somewhat training, because she might hurt herself, and then that's on me. And I don't want that to happen. I'd rather see her have a long, happy life in retirement where we can go on big walks and she can run off leash and she can be doing whatever she wants and not hurting. But I don't even know that I trust her to run at a dog walk at full speed with me doing competitive agility anymore, because I just am not doing it frequently enough with her to feel confident. I think if you have a little bit less of a reckless dog, that's less of a problem. Like if they go a little slower, but I'm just like, we're good.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I really appreciate about you. It's always about the well-being of your dog, physical, mental, and from a training, and obviously in a lot of great things that you're doing for all of your dogs. If you just join us, we are with Jessica Ajoux. She is the co-founder of United Dog Agility, and she's doing a Q&A with us. So you're going to want the show notes. Most of you folks have already done it, but if you haven't done it yet, go into our notes section and put the word dog lover, and you'll get access to the show notes. And make sure you do the hashtag paw love, and we'll do a 1 TDC drawing later as well. All right, I've got and if you have a question for Jessica, if you just joined in and you want to ask it, just type it in the notes and we'll do our best to view it. Okay, next question, which is really related to a lot of what you're talking about in keeping your dog healthy. And that is, how do I increase my dog's flexibility? And kind of thinking early on, it's not as much of a deal, but as they get older, what do you do? Because you put a lot of effort in the well-being of your dog. So what are some of your tricks or secrets to keep those dogs flexible and healthy?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think we'll look at it a couple ways. they're all dogs are built differently, just like all people. Like
Mhm.
as a human being, I have always been able to like reach down and touch my toes with no problem, whether I'm in shape, not in shape, been doing yoga, not been doing yoga. Like that seems for my body something that has always been somewhat easy.
Mhm.
However, ask me to like sit like Indian style, like cross legs, and my knees are literally at my ears. Like I can't like, and I have some friends who just their knees are like almost on the floor, and I'm like, that would require me like actually working on my flexibility, doing yoga, whatever, so much to be able to do that. So that I just use that as an example. Like each body is a little bit different, and to change some of those things would require quite a bit. And then I always think there are some, there's limits to it. Some dogs really like seem to bend their spine more naturally than others.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm sorry, Fame was probably my most natural bendy dog. While Lou turns very well, she's not specifically bendy. She just is able to collect and turn, but she doesn't necessarily bend as much as Fame. And then Prime is a Mack truck, and there's literally no bend to him at all, and it causes a lot of different handling. So I don't know that I worry too much about it personally. I think that I take note about what it is that they do well naturally, and then try to work on the things that they need more for. But I'm not a dog physical therapist. I'm not trained in totally knowing what to do. I just know from living with my dogs and doing agility, like what my dog's natural motion looks like. So let's say I'm trying to increase flexibility in order to make a good turn on a jump, which I don't know if that's where that root of that question is, but like
Right.
that's definitely one we all seem to want, is better turns on jumps. And if they bend, we might get better turns. So I would, take note of which direction does my dog more naturally turn, and maybe make dedicated training sessions. And this is not hours. It's just if I have 5 minutes to do something, perhaps the thing I should do is working on his turn to the right, if that's the difficult one. And if I really see some struggle, like first thing I would do is lower the bar and just start at the level where I'm getting the type of turn that I want, because it's not an upstairs thing. Well, sometimes it is, but if they know that they're supposed to turn and they're doing it the best they can, and you're not happy with the quality, then it's conditioning the body. And I understand what a one-handed push-up is. You can yell at me all you want, it's not happening, right? I understand what a pull-up is. I can do one like 5 months ago, 4, but not like now. It's like, and you can do it. It won't matter. I can't physically do it. Now, if I work on it, right, condition the body to get better and better, maybe I'm doing 2-hand push-up. Maybe I'm like picking my hand up one time during the push-up. Like you can increase it.
Right.
But you have to just be I would think very cautious. Like don't be doing this at your full jump height yet. You have to build up to it. And then the other side is I'm always cautious that they're not injured or hurt.
Mhm.
And so I take my dogs to be seen regularly by our dog physical therapist, who happens to be Advanced Canine Rehab. And they go every month, even if there's no issues or whatnot. And that's just so I can have peace of mind that everyone is in good shape. That way, if I'm seeing like a bad turn one way or another, I know that they're not hurt, and I can safely ask them to do it, because it's not, it's also not fair to insist that, you do the one-handed push-up if your arm is broken. Like, obviously that's an extreme example, but even if you've like sprained your hand or something, like it's going to be more difficult if there's some underlying condition. And that's where you need to know your dog pretty well to know what they naturally do and what it usually looks like. And if you're suspicious of something, go get them checked, because you're not being fair to the dog if you keep trying to make them bend better when there's some physical thing.
Right. And I think what's important in knowing you as well, you mentioned Advanced Canine Rehab with David and Riassiani, is you also are proactive, like you mentioned in your answer, is there's things that you know, there's things that you don't know, that you rely on the professional, doctor in physical therapy or, canine PT like Ria does. We have some other guests as well, like Debbie Tarak has the same thing, or Dr. Deb Knapp. It's like they have the expertise to know. But what's nice, and I know you've done this, you evaluate them early on so that you know what the physical limitations are or the advantages that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love in your answer is that you adapt it in the training and you don't push in a place that's not good for their body or their physiology. So
yeah, I think you have to just remember it is a physical sport after all. I mean, A-frame training comes to mind too. I mean, it's very difficult for some of them to do running A-frame. It's very easy for some of them to do running A-frame. But like if you have one who understands what you're trying to do, but they're not physically doing it, it literally could be because they're not in condition to do it, or they don't have the, like you're saying, flexibility. And you just have to remember to work on that very gradually, the same as if you're trying to build up to a marathon. You don't just go run 26 miles. Like you have to do this incrementally. And that's why sometimes it takes a lot of work too. And that actually harks back to the question earlier with the people moving away, like can they keep going? And if the answer is you can keep them in shape and going hiking and such, that's good. My answer for Famous was like, I am not putting in as much dedication to agility specific motions with her anymore. And so that's why I chose to no longer be asking her to do it.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think actually, Sarah, and I'll just put that in because I think that really sums up what you're doing is, and thank you for putting that, Sarah, and sharing that simple word. It's a prehab. And that's really what you're doing. I mean, I love the way you answer those questions and you're constantly making sure that your dog is in physical good shape no matter what. So thanks, Sarah, for that. I think that's a really good word. And that's really what I see, you, Jessica, you've been doing that very proactively.
Yeah. And I think that this is funny. Like, I mean, I was an athlete. I did water polo all through like high school and college and have remained active and such. And like, what am I now? 35. And it's like, I've definitely noticed the difference. And I'm not saying that's old. Everyone's like, you're young, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, but like, it's certainly not what it was when I could just get up and go. And so my own experience of feeling like, I can feel that little thing in my back. I know what that means. It means I have to do X, Y, Z. And if I don't do it, I'm going to end up getting hurt, even though I'm not hurt right now. And so I try to think of that for the dogs too, especially as they age. Like your puppies and young dogs, they're like, they're going to get up and run. But that's like, right. If I take my dogs to the park that's behind us and they've been in crates for a while, I don't just let them out and let them rip. Like the older they are, the longer they're on leash doing their little warm up before we go, because I'm trying to evaluate or think about as they age and get a little bit older, like you have to like warm the body up and cool them down. And I know you guys will be doing talks about those things, but it's critical because they can't go from a crate to running a course. It's not, it might work in the short term, but you'll pay the price in the long term.
In the long term is always what, obviously I know you're very careful about. And for us from a one TDC would work so well. That's what we love is helping those athletes stay in the game the longest possible, but in feeling good and not hurting, because they're going to push themselves to the extreme.
No, the dogs will do anything for us, and that's where we have to be. You have to be so proactive about it because they'll just keep going. It's amazing.
Yeah, no,
problem actually, but you have to be your dog's advocate for sure.
Excellent. Well, Jessica, I know some folks that maybe just joined in now. We've got our last questions in now. So what I want you to remember, if you just joined, make sure you put Dog Lover at the bottom. You'll get all the notes. And if you're watching this and it's a recorded, put your question in the notes still, because we go back and we see them. And Jessica will make sure that she sees that and we'll get you an answer. And make sure also, if you haven't done before we wrap up, to put Paw Love, #PawLove in the notes. That gets you in the drawing for the One TDC. And if you need some One TDC, go to workstowell.com and use Jessica's code LIVE10. You get 10% off our whole store. So you may want to take advantage of that. Jessica, I really want to thank you for coming on board and doing this Q&A. I have a feeling this is not the last time we'll do a Q&A. It's a lot of fun and it gets everyone to jump in and participate. as well. Thank you everyone for joining and participating and commenting. We really appreciate that. And what's next for you, Jessica? Training today.
Training today. Yeah, well, nothing too much on the horizon yet, but training our puppies, studying courses, those type of things, and continuing doing what I love doing.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing, and we are very thankful for the giving back that you do. So have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And Jessica, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.